to the Lathisms podcast. I'm your host, Evelyn Lamb. In each episode, we invite a Hispanic or Latinx mathematician to share their journey in mathematics. I'm very excited today to be talking with Stephen Wirkus. Hi, how are you?
Doing okay. How are you?
All right. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, where you teach, where you are right now, which I gather is different from where you actually teach?
Yes. So I'm a professor at Arizona State University. I sort of have been all over the place. I was born and raised in Missouri, in Kansas City. I went to grad school in upstate New York at Cornell University. Took a position at Cal Poly Pomona over in the Los Angeles area for 7 years. And along the way, got married. And so my wife and I, so it's Erica Camacho, we were trying to solve the two-body problem, and Arizona State University is the one that allowed us to do that. So before that, we were 45 miles apart in terms of our schools, and that made one of us always have an awful commute. So this is much better. In terms of where I'm at right now, so she has a position at the National Science Foundation, and so I am remotely teaching my classes via Zoom this year, which is working out well so far.
Great. And do you remember if you were interested in math when you were a child, or do you know how you got interested in math?
So at some point along the way, and I'm not quite sure when, seems to remember is 6th grade, 7th grade, something like that, I started being pretty good at math, picked it up easier than a lot of the others. And it's funny, but the thing that sort of always motivated me was that I didn't seem to always be the quickest one in the class. I was perpetually second, which is just kind of an odd... Maybe I'm from a family of 7, and so we just tend to be competitive.
But you had something to strive for.
But I had something to strive for, and I was pretty good at it, yes.
And what field of math are you in now?
I'm in applied math and basically studying mathematical biology. And so in terms of undergraduate, so I didn't know what I wanted to do when I went to college. I was the first in my family to go to college. And I know I didn't want to check undecided in the box, and it seemed like all of my friends from high school were checking engineering. So didn't want to be one of the crowd, so I chose math because I was good at it. And then I enjoyed physics when I took that in college, and actually did a double major in math and physics. And it wasn't until my 5th year there, so I was on a 5-year plan, that I decided or realized that what it really was that I liked was seeing the application of the math. And so that allowed me to then sort of clarify what it was that I wanted to study. So in graduate school, I started off with applications to physics, and then halfway through switched to applications of biology. So my PhD, my dissertation, is basically a physics application, and almost all the publications since then have been biology applications.
Okay, so you've kind of been all over the place.
Literally many times, yes.
Yeah, and what is the current research that you're doing?
So the current research I'm doing is more epidemiological, so looking at populations of things. So I'm working with a couple of students on one looking at Adderall in the college population, another one looking at Vicodin abuse or opioid abuse in a more general population, and then also looking at part of my research area is looking at photoreceptors, and so thinking of that as a population, concentrations of chemicals, and looking at those kinds of things.
Okay. And so these things about Adderall and Vicodin, are those about like the population dynamics of how those drugs are distributed? Or I'm just curious about how that works as a math problem.
Yes. So it's not how they're necessarily distributed, although that can be one part of it, but it's more breaking people into classes of people, as in somebody might be exposed to or susceptible to being a user. You might have other people that are users because it was something that was prescribed. They might be users because of, going to some party or gathering or having a friend that uses whichever one it might be. Um, Having another class of people that might be abusers, and then another class that might be recovered. And so looking at the interaction of those and realizing that what you want to do is really minimize the amount of people in your abused class. And so trying to figure out what you can change in your system to have that effect.
Interesting. So this is something that seems like really could have a big impact on people.
Potentially, yes, potentially. The only potential problem is sometimes the thing that's predicted to have the greatest effect you might have no control over.
Right. Yeah, I guess there are a lot of variables working here.
Yep.
Backing up a little bit, do you remember being encouraged to go into math when you were younger?
So I was encouraged to stay in school, for sure. And then in undergraduate, it was, interestingly enough, an English professor of mine who was the one that encouraged me to think about graduate school. So I had been doing perfectly fine, lots of A's, a few B's in undergrad. And, we were having a conversation and she told me, have you thought about graduate school? And I had to ask her, what's graduate school? And so she was the one that then explained to me, you can get paid to continue studying, which sounded like a terrific idea to me. So I stuck with math and studied.
And so she wasn't necessarily expecting you to go to graduate school in English, just somewhere?
Oh, not at all. So when I started undergraduate, I had the fear that I was going to fail out, and so I figured I was going to fail out with a good reason, and so I joined the honors program. And so she was one of the directors of the honors program. So as it turned out, I didn't fail out. I did rather well, but she was the one that sort of pointed me in the right direction at a few key points in life.
And what was the transition like between undergraduate and graduate school?
It was one of the probably two or three most difficult transitions in life. So I remember in undergraduate, the normal course load is 5 courses, and then being told, the week before classes start in graduate school that 3 is a normal amount, and thinking to myself, oh, that'll be easy. Let me just do 4 instead. And so that was a mistake that I didn't make again. So graduate school was is sort of the fire hose analogy, where you can spend as much time as you can, and it's still never enough time.
Right. I was just editing an earlier episode and someone used that exact same, drinking out of the fire hose
Oh, yes.
thing. So did you have mentors when you were in graduate school that helped you kind of find your way through the fire hose?
So yes, and it wasn't always sort of in the places that you would expect. There were mentors that weren't necessarily my teachers in class, although there were, a couple that I would go to for, advice on things. I was part of back in a different life, I used to run a lot. And so some of my running friends, who were also professors, would sometimes give advice, and they had nothing to do with math or encourage me to go into their area or anything. And so just sort of the advice you get from experienced people that even aren't necessarily in your area, that seems to be where I got a lot of my advice and mentoring from.
And now that you're further along in your career, what are some of the things that maybe you feel like have helped you develop professionally as you move along?
I've always viewed myself as somebody who works hard, but I don't know that I've often had a clear mindset or clear goal in terms of this is exactly what I want to do. And so what that has kind of allowed me to do is more easier roll with things that might come up. And so I think having some flexibility, realizing that maybe plans that you had might not be the best ones, but there might be a perfectly good alternative that's not too much of a step away from what your original plan were. And so I feel like at many points in time, plans that I may have had went awry. But if I was willing to try the backup actually worked out much better than my original plan.
And I guess that kind of leads into my next question, which is about overcoming challenges in your career. And, do you mind talking about some of the challenges that you've faced and how you've managed to get past them?
Um, yeah, so I think uh, some of the challenges, the biggest ones were probably academic in nature, well, at least initially. And it was realizing that hard work definitely was one of those things, but sort of an acceptance of that you might try all you might and it might not be good enough. In some sense, sort of calm the nerves enough to maybe let the hard work take over a little bit more. And then also hearing from mentors, whether in the field or, peers that even were a year or two ahead that, sort of gave you the advice of, you know what, that class kicked everybody's butt. Don't worry about it. Which didn't mean, stop trying. It just means that that maybe you can try all you want and it won't make a difference, or maybe it will. But sort of having the peace of mind that things will work out, even if not maybe in the way you intended. And then every so often just sort of putting things in perspective of, I never really thought or felt that I had the pressure to achieve, even in graduate school, up to that level, and being thankful for where I was. And then that also sort of, I felt like took a little bit of pressure off. And now that I'm saying this, it seems like a lot of the challenges, maybe, a half of them are probably pressure related. And so if you can sort of learn to calm your nerves better and, proceed or succeed and try with clear mind, that can go a long ways.
And I'd imagine at this point in your career, you're also doing a lot of advising and mentoring. And yeah, what are some things that you try to think about when you're advising students?
Um, so in terms of advising the students, I think it's a couple of things. So first one is it's whatever decision they end up making, it's never too late to change it. And so this is sort of motivated by my first couple of days of undergraduate, in that I went to a campus that was mostly a commuter campus. So it was University of Missouri at Kansas City. And in my very first class, there was a 65-year-old lady who just was taking classes because she wanted to. And in like most of my math classes, at least a third of the class were 40 and over students who were returning to get their degree. Um, and so this sort of had two effects. One, of realizing that yes, I have that option to, let's say, drop out and come back later, but I might as well take advantage of it now because, there's no family commitments or anything else. And so I should just buckle down and do it now. But that also the advice that I can give my students now is it's better if you can buckle down now and take care of it. But don't think because you might, choose one thing now that in 3 years you can't change your mind. And so having them realize that it's not that often that life is a single track that you can't ever get off of. That you can always sort of backtrack or change or alter. Might take more work, might take more time, might take more money, more sacrifice, but nothing is ever final.
Now, can you go back and tell me that when I was 25?
Well, so it's a question of, I don't know if I could have told myself that at 25 because I probably wouldn't have listened. And so it's telling the students, hoping that, 20% of what I say will sink in.
Yeah. Well, we always have great advice for our past selves.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, that's such an important thing to be able to do, is to know that life isn't, you aren't stuck on whatever track you're on right now.
That's right. That's right. It might be difficult, but you're not stuck.
And we're recording this on October 15th, which is the last day of Hispanic Heritage Month. Do you have any thoughts about Hispanic Heritage Month?
Probably about the middle of graduate school. I started working with a summer research program for undergraduates, and it was mostly Latinos and a handful of Native Americans. And I've worked with similar type programs, co-ran, co-started, actually, one as well. And so what I've come to realize through experience over the years is how crucial it is for a decent number of people to have role models that they can actually identify with. And it doesn't have to be necessarily somebody that looks like them, but it has to be somebody that there are similarities with them. That being said, I think the easiest one is when you, at least at the initial, have somebody that you can sort of look up to because you can see yourself in that person. And so having Hispanic Heritage Month, I think is an excellent way of highlighting the wonderful work that a lot of Latinos have done, because I think a lot of it has been undervalued simply because of the way, historically society has liked to keep things in the way they always have been, even though demographics may be changing. Ways that we realize we should be teaching might be changing. Not everybody thinks that everything should be, reconsidered, or that many things should be rethought in terms of how we best do things or approach things. And so I think Hispanic Heritage Month is one way to sort of help shift this discussion so that obviously, we Latinos realize there's a lot of us that are, pretty talented, but I think a wider range of people might not necessarily think that simply because of media stereotypes and everything else. And so I think it's a terrific idea.
Well, thanks a lot for taking the time to talk with me today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Lathisms podcast. It's produced by me, Evelyn Lamb, and made possible by a Tensor Summa grant from the Mathematical Association of America. Our music is Volvere by La Floresta. Lathisms is an initiative to celebrate the accomplishments of Hispanic and Latinx mathematicians. It was founded in 2016 by Alexander Diaz-Lopez, Pamela Harris, Alicia Prieto Langarica, and Gabriel Sosa. You can find more information about the project at lathisms.org. That's LATHISMS.org. Join us next time to hear from another inspiring mathematician.